is early morning. On the fringes of Nariva, the red-bellied macaws noisily preen at the tops of the royal palms, which are their nighttime roosts. They are preparing to leave for the feeding trees deep in the heart of the swamp. They are some of the last of their breed to be found here. Their cousins, the blue and gold macaws, were once also native to Nariva, but they were too beautiful and too accessible for their own good, and are now considered extinct in the wild throughout the island. This is Harilal. He too roosts on the fringes of the swamp. He has lived here for the past 10 years in this small house which he built with his own hands. The swamp provides his home and his livelihood. He cultivates a few acres of rice and grows some okros, dasheen, peppers and tomatoes for himself and his family. From the rich, dark mud in the shallows, he harvests the black conch, which he sells at the roadside to passing motorists. This is Shamo, another of the swamp's inhabitants. Along the banks of the channels between the mangrove roots, he sets his homemade bamboo traps for the blue crab. The crabs used to be abundant, but now, as with the once plentiful black conch, stocks are dwindling. So too with the cascadoo, for which Shamo and his young brother Bobby fish in the shallow pools. Nariva in the morning, a place seemingly of peace and tranquility. Man in harmony with nature. Until not so long ago, the Nariva swamp was just such a place. Situated on Trinidad's east coast, it is the largest and the richest of all the wetlands on the island, with a great wealth of wildlife. Several of the species found here are endangered. Some are on the verge of extinction. So valued is Nariva that it was recently highlighted as a wetland of international importance under the Ramsar Convention, an international forum for the preservation of wetlands. This is the other face of Nariva in the morning. The smoldering carcasses of trees lie where they were bulldozed, in tangled, smoking heaps, and the formerly lush landscape takes on the appearance of a wasteland. But this is destruction with a purpose, for where once the reeds and marshes of the wetlands grew, and the proud trees of the swamp forest threw their shade, rice now grows. Acre after acre of paddy stretching into the distance, and therein lies the dilemma. Should we sacrifice what some might call unproductive, valueless swamp in the interest of producing more food for an ever-growing population? Or should we protect what is left of our few remaining acres of marsh and swamp forest with their populations of manatees, monkeys and macaws as a national treasure, a part of our natural heritage? Man, unlike the other animals sharing this planet, has the unique ability to change his surroundings. One of the reasons he does this is to create an environment in which he can secure food for his family and community. This manipulation of nature for nurture, rather than the gathering of food wherever it grows, has contributed largely to the world's population explosion. And as the numbers of people continue to increase, the land needed to feed and house them must also expand. This happens at the expense of the natural habitats in between. With natural areas diminishing, the habitat that is left becomes more and more important to a country's wildlife, and the conflict between wildlife management and land use for rural development escalates. The only way to resolve such conflicts satisfactorily is to balance benefits gained by the one use against those afforded by the other. But that is more easily said than done. The situation with Nariva swamp provides a classic example of how unregulated development might well lead to dire consequences for all concerned. The monetary value of crops grown in the swamp is easy to determine. This, however, is a minor part of the real value of Nariva. For the swamp is in fact a sort of bank in which is deposited a considerable portion of the country's natural wealth, its flora and fauna. Originally covering well over 6,000 hectares, the actual area today of virgin swamp vegetation, comprising reeds, marshes, and swamp forest, has been reduced by almost a half. Concentrated into this relatively small area is Nariva's living treasure, its plants and animals. From the first shafts of morning sunlight awakening the roosting macaws, through the mid-morning heat with the howler monkeys basking in the sun, to the hour of sunset when diurnal animals curl up for the night and those creatures that are active in the dark begin to emerge, one is surrounded by life. The very ground is teeming with life. These forest bachaks are busy transporting leaf cuttings to their subterranean nests where they will be used as a compost for the bachak's fungus gardens. A bachak nest can house over 1 million individuals and can cover an area as large as a basketball court. This wasp is getting on with the task of raising the next generation. She digs a small tunnel in the earth and provisions it with a grasshopper upon which she will lay an egg. The larva will have fresh grasshopper to feed on. This species prefers to build its house. It does this by collecting mud at a nearby waterhole and carefully molding an urn-shaped cell. Caterpillars are the preferred diet here. There are many such wasps to be found in Nariva, each species with its own special design of abode and prey preference. The vulnerability of life in Nariva swamp is vividly demonstrated by the plight of the macaws. An important source of food, shelter, and nesting sites for these macaws are the royal and Maurice palms. The magnificent blue and gold macaws which once flourished here shared this resource. They were captured by felling the dead palm stems in which they nested. If one was lucky and the chick was not killed with the impact, someone got a pet macaw, but there was one fewer nesting site. Dead palms are not an abundant resource. Indeed, the macaws have to compete with other species like the crimson-crested woodpecker, which also use these trees. We have already lost the blue and gold macaw. Destruction of the palm forests is a sure way of losing the red-bellied macaws as well. Another threatened bird is the Maurice oriole, much sought after for the sweetness of its song. It has now been trapped almost to the point of extinction. A few pairs still survive, but one would have to be very fortunate to get a glimpse of them. Altogether, over 200 species of birds can be found in Nariva. To the migratory birds, wetlands such as Nariva are an essential part of the cycle of their existence. This is because they have had to fly many hundreds or even thousands of miles from their northern breeding grounds to the wintering grounds in the south. Covering such vast distances, they must rest frequently en route. Swamp areas such as Nariva and similar wetlands act as stepping stones. Destruction of one of these stepping stones may have disastrous consequences if the distances between adjacent wetlands increase beyond the range of the birds. Beneath the dark surface of the swamp's larger open water areas, the last remaining herds of manatee in the southern Caribbean rove. These huge and gentle animals are now confined to smaller and smaller pockets as the area of the swamp dwindles. The manatee, like the macaws and the Maurice orioles, are protected by law, but in spite of this, habitat destruction and poaching continue to take a heavy toll. Sharing the depths with the manatee are many more rare and beautiful aquatic creatures. These include the anaconda. Anacondas, or wheels as they are known locally, are among the largest snakes in the world and can attain a length of over 10 meters. The Suriname toad, another underwater dweller, mimics an old bit of wood or leaf with wavy appendages and lies in wait on the bottom, practically invisible. As unwary fish swim by, those that come close enough are unceremoniously gobbled up. Between the roots of the mangrove, millions of shrimp-like creatures live. The protection given by the roots and the abundance of food make a perfect nursery for the marine fish that come here to spawn. These fish would not survive for long if deprived of their breeding grounds. The terrestrial life of Nariva is every bit as rich as that beneath the surface of the still waters. Within the marsh itself are several islands of dry land supporting many species. The largest of these islands is Bush, which covers about 1,600 hectares and is a wildlife sanctuary, having been so designated by the government in 1968. Today, as then, colonies of red howler monkeys roam through the canopy, feeding on the fruits of forest trees and loudly proclaiming their presence. The smaller white-faced capuchins are here in abundance too. They inhabit the same general area as the red howlers, but are careful to keep their distance from their larger and more aggressive cousins. No longer to be found on Bush Island, but still occurring in the forested areas bordering the swamp, are the collared peccary or quenk. At one time, herds of as many as 20 animals were not uncommon. Other mammals of Nariva's swamp forest include the beautiful and timid brocket deer. Also the agouti, which is much prized for its meat. The lap, the largest of all our rodents, and another favorite of the connoisseurs of local game, lives here too. The official tally of mammals to be found in the Nariva swamp is 57 species, of which 32 are bats. Saccopteryx, or the sack-winged bat, is unlike the majority of bat species which frequent caves and very dark areas during the day. Saccopteryx roost high on the sides of buttressed trees and sometimes in the tree itself. This is a Mapipi balsin, or fer de lance, a highly venomous snake. Unlike the anaconda, which is aquatic, the Mapipi keeps to the drier areas. It is one of only 4 poisonous snakes to be found in Trinidad. The others are the Mapipi zanana, or bushmaster, and 2 species of coral snake. These also occur in Nariva, but by and large, the reptile population poses no threat whatsoever and includes many beautiful and fascinating species. This then has been a portrait of Nariva in its still relatively unspoilt and pristine state. But as we have seen, there is another face to Nariva that is far less attractive. It is the face of destruction, for within the past decade, and especially during the last 3 years, considerable areas of natural vegetation have disappeared, largely as a direct result of illegal squatting for agriculture. This loss of habitat has decimated the wildlife population, and the ecological balance of the whole swamp is being threatened through land clearance, drainage, and the use of herbicides, pesticides, and fertilizers. Rice is the crop that is being most widely cultivated. In fact, rice cultivation has been practiced for many years on a limited scale. Farmers traditionally planted small areas that could be managed with a minimum of labor and very little, if any, mechanized equipment, perhaps a tractor shared between several of them. However, within recent years, the Nariva swamp, including parts of the Bush Wildlife Sanctuary, has seen rice cultivation on a level far beyond the traditional small-scale operation. This began when a few well-financed entrepreneurs arrived on the scene with sophisticated farming machinery responding to government incentives to produce rice. These incentives included a subsidized price for paddy and the availability of low-interest loans from the Agricultural Development Bank to purchase equipment. The incentives had the sought-after effect, increasing rice production from 1.5 million to 21.25 million kilos between 1985 and 1992. But in Nariva, as larger and larger tracts of swamp forest fell to fire and the bulldozer, and incursions began into the wildlife sanctuary itself, concerned local conservationists mounted a loud campaign in defense of the swamp, in some cases directly accusing the entrepreneur farmers of illegally squatting on state lands and damaging the swamp ecosystem. Molly Gaskin is president of the Pointe-à-Pierre Wildfowl Trust.
We feel very strongly about what has happened in the Nariva, about these illegal squatters, these land grabbers that have moved into the area. We were very happy when the judiciary actually ruled in the favor of law and order. I mean, this is the first time that something like that has happened in our country. The law was applied the way it was meant to be. But now we need the government to move. We need the director of state lands. We need the minister to do something, to pass the word on to the forestry officials, powers that be, and get them to move. We must get these people out of there. They have not only destroyed a very important and vital ecosystem, important to every one of us in this country, but they have destroyed the wind belt, the Nariva wind belt. God help us all, every one of us, if we get storms and hurricanes that come through from the Atlantic. There's nothing there to stop it. Is anyone even thinking about that? Do these people care about that? No. Then they have gone in and destroyed the small man, the small farmers in the area. They've even pushed down some of these people's homes. We have no problem with the small farmer. He has not destroyed the area. He has worked in harmony with the land for many generations. He grows his rice in small amounts. He harvests the black conch. He harvests the cascadura. Our best, largest cascadura comes from the Nariva. And within this last year, we have lost thousands and thousands of fish of our cascadura and our black conchs. Is that what we must allow? But above all, must we allow this anarchy to take place in our country, that people can move in and do whatever they like, defy the government, defy the law, defy us, and nobody does anything about it? What is happening to our country? What is happening to our people? Surely something must be done.
Molly Gaskin and others, worried about the extent of the environmental degradation, were able to marshal considerable public support, and hundreds demonstrated on World Environment Day for firm action by the government to protect Nariva and other environmentally sensitive areas. Reacting to the growing public concern, the Government Minister for Agriculture, Dr. Keith Rowley, visited Nariva for a first-hand look. What he saw was sufficient to convince him of the need for rapid government intervention, and a series of measures was announced aimed at halting the destruction. An order was made declaring the whole of Nariva swamp a prohibited area, and steps were taken to stop not only the clearing of new areas, but the farming of areas already cleared. Gulcharan and Parvati Jabbar, who have some 200 acres under cultivation, contested what they claimed was an infringement of their constitutional right to the enjoyment of property. But in the High Court, the judge dismissed the motion, stating that the wildlife in the Nariva must be protected in the public interest. In spite of this, Ramrup Jabbar, father of Gulcharan, believes they have been well treated.
We were treated very good, because if you look at the price, the rice, the paddy, we get 89 cents per pound, and that is a very good price. You hardly get that type of price anyway. What has happened? The small farmers or the smaller farmers in this beach area, they hardly want to work. They don't have a tractor, they don't have a combine, they don't have nothing. But they make a certain amount of acquisition about we big farmers, because we are not, we don't live in the area. We came from outside of the area, from Las Lumas and Konupia and so on. And we brought in our very heavy equipment, which cost millions of dollars. And we try to, what I must say, cultivate this land on a very productive basis. It is not true to say that we have destroyed the livelihood or changed whatever in this area in the Nariva swamp. We have helped quite a lot of people, poor people. During the rainy weather, we employed quite a lot of people. When I say so, about 30 people per farmer. Mr. Akalu employed by far more than me, because he has a larger acreage than I have. And we have been assisting these small farmers all the time. But these small farmers had made plenty representation to the state or to the Minister of Agriculture. And that is the reason why people might say that the state is bad or biased or not acting fairly.
The large rice farmers contend that they have not interfered unduly with the livelihood of those who make their living from the swamp in more traditional ways. But this is disputed by many who claim to have been adversely affected. Harold Singh has lived in Kernahan on Nariva's southern flank for 15 years.
Now with the big farmers in them gone, them take the people them land who block off land and thing. Right, and these people, the poor farmers in them have farmers to plow up the land. So with these big farmers them gone now, them take about 100,000 acres and things, because they put tractor in there and grid out everything. And they make the road. The people them ride, the owner in them for the land even can't go there. So here and all they come to do the same thing too. But if they come and go through in the swamp here the place where the cascado and conks and it will rain then. And if they go and cultivate that place to plant the rice, they'll put chemical in the water that you don't get no cascado, no conchs, no fishes and anything. Everything is dead out.
Since I know myself, fishing is my living, and this is what is my family offer. This for cascado, catching cascado, catch conchs. But these rice farmers and them now, since they come in here, them take over the whole swamp and they just destroying our living, and the poor people have nothing to go by. So, it's according to the saying in the country, is who have grass will feed cows, and who don't have will have to suffer. It comes like us. We don't have nothing to go by, except when in the land dry and the crop we used to make a little gardening, where we catch with little fish and conchs, and these people then come and they're just destroying everything. The majority of the swamp they just destroyed, so we don't have no place to fishing, we don't have no place to catch no conchs, we don't have no place to plant garden, because if you go inside of that land, the man will tell you flat, come out of there, that is his own. So when you do take stock, where you going to make a living? If they have nothing to go by, I don't know how the poor people in this country will really survive in this place then.
But there are factors other than rice farming that have been contributing to Nariva's demise. These include illegal hunting, squatting, and the large-scale cultivation of cash crops other than rice, such as watermelon and, not least, marijuana. Minister with responsibility for agriculture, Dr. Keith Rowley, speaks about the government's plans to deal with these problems.
A lot of activity has taken place in the swamp area, the bush sanctuary and places like that. The government's position on that is that there will be a zero tolerance with respect to interference in these areas. Persons who have interfered with those lands would be evicted. As you would have seen, we have gone to court. We have stood up to all the legal challenges. We have just about concluded that hurdle. And we are just preparing to take steps to evict all persons who are improperly in those areas. And insofar as agricultural lands become available on the borders of the swamp, persons interested in farming will have to apply properly, would be assessed properly, and lands would be properly leased to persons to farm within the context of the guidelines to be established for agricultural activity in the whole Plummeter area.
Dr. Carol James, a wildlife biologist and until recently head of the Wildlife Section, Ministry of Agriculture, comments.
The Forestry Division has, of course, been very concerned and recommended since 1980 that it be declared as a national park. And through the help of the OAS, had drawn up a system of national parks and protected areas for the country and demarcated a boundary for the Nariva swamp. We're talking about 13 years later, nothing really has happened with that. And that is quite sad because I think it's a resource that can be used economically for development. You know, we're not the conservationists of old, where people set aside areas for non-use by human beings. And the river swamp can be used for agriculture, for many of the activities that are undertaken right now. In fact, activities can be zoned. I think the important point to note is that Ramsar supports the idea of wise use. Essentially, that's one of the essential tenets, and that one can utilize these resources sustainably. So that rice growing, hunting, farming, fishing, everything can be undertaken in the Nariva swamp if properly managed and zoned. So one would want to develop a management plan, and this is what the Forestry Division in collaboration with the Ramsar Secretariat hopes to do.
But even if with the help of Ramsar a management plan is finally implemented, it may already be too late to stave off serious ill effects from what has already been done. Dr. Carol James again.
Once the activities of farmers and illegal squatters and so on took place, you found that there was clearing all around that area, so that it became literally an island of vegetation with no connections or linkages. So any animals that occurred in there literally became trapped in that small area. They were unable to migrate outwards, and therefore you cause problems with inbreeding, where you'd find grandparents breeding with their offspring and so on, among the monkey population or among the mammals that occurred in there. And that is one of the major concerns that we have, that the wildlife will be choked off, choked to death literally. And it may not happen instantly, but it could happen certainly, within the foreseeable future. I would think next 10, 15 years. At this particular rate, we can lose it altogether.
One of the areas that is thought to have considerable potential for Nariva and will certainly be taken into consideration in any management plan is its attraction as an ecotourism site.
And we're literally sitting on a gold mine. Countries like Costa Rica, and when you look at the Everglades in the United States, which is a large wetland ecosystem, it is very undiversified, not as interesting as, for instance, our own Caroni or the Nariva swamp in terms of the diversity of flora and fauna in small areas. And they literally make millions and millions of dollars from purely ecotourism in the Everglades. We certainly know that we can tap some of that because people come down to the Acerite Nature Center. And they don't only want to see the rainforest. They want to see the scarlet ibis, they want to see howler monkeys, they'd like to see the manatee. We see the manatee fairly regularly, and it's a nice accessible area into the swamp. So that I believe those are some of the options we need to pursue.
So what then are the choices for Nariva? How can we ensure the greatest economic and social benefits from the swamp, while at the same time maintaining its integrity and genetic diversity for future generations? The key lies in the proper zoning of activities in Nariva, for the choice is not simply agriculture versus wildlife. Rather, it is a choice between a management program which would permit the controlled use and exploitation of the swamp's resources versus an unplanned and haphazard approach that would inevitably result in the continued destruction of habitat and a further depletion of the wildlife population. But to simply acknowledge Nariva's importance and the necessity for controlled development is not enough. Action that has been initiated to stop the destruction must be followed through quickly. Otherwise, all the plans for conservation and development will be to no avail, because before very long, there will be little left. The time has come to stop talking and start doing, or Nariva will die, and we will have lost not only the richest of all our natural treasures, but the respect also of the international community, who, through Ramsar, have acknowledged the importance of Nariva in a world context. We have a duty then, not only to ourselves and our children, but to all people, to see that Nariva survives. Nariva must not die.